Let's everybody me introduce to you Vikram Aditya, who is co-founder and CEO of DAOverse. And Vikram would be speaking about the biggest opportunity areas in DAOverse. Is it correct?
Yes, Ross, that's the topic.
And for those who are listening us here, please, you could send your questions in the chat during the presentation. And for those who are listening us on broadcast links in YouTube and in Facebook, please send questions to me or in the Telegram chat, and I will ask these questions here. So Vikram, please go ahead.
Thanks, Ross. Hey, everyone. I know we have gone through a lot today. I have been attending a few sessions on and off, so it is going to be slightly different from whatever you have experienced so far. We're going to keep it super on point in terms of what exactly are the opportunities. There's going to be as less of beating around the bush as I can. I know we are very close to the closure of the event for the day, and that would simply mean that I would ideally want if all of you just walk out of here with certain thoughts and ideas in terms of, hey, this looks like an interesting area to explore, or this looks like an interesting place to collaborate. So it's simply going to be point by point, based on my experience and based on whatever time we have spent working with DAOs. And I'll just come to my introduction and what we do and what makes me relatively a slightly better authority to probably comment on a few opportunity areas that may be up for grabs. We'll just take a look at everything as we go ahead. So I'll keep on moving. Please feel free to drop your questions. Once in a while, I'll pause and start asking questions, start answering the questions that you have raised as well. That's me. And that's a beautiful picture from Kashmir earlier this month when I was just skiing. And yes, you can find me everywhere at Vix_Ram. But what does DAOlens really even do? This is the only time I'm going to talk about DAOlens in terms of like what we do and who we work with, so that you have a fair sense of where I may be like really gathering all the insights that I'm going to present henceforth. We as a team, we started some 8-9 months back, and our focus was simply one thing. We go into a room with a DAO, and we have worked with, I believe by now, over 120 DAOs in different capacities. When I say work with, we have deployed our solutions for some of them. We have worked as a part of contribution team in some of them. We continue to collaborate with some of them. We have built whitelisted solutions for some of them where you will probably not even realize that what they're using has been what has been built by us. We have helped them develop frameworks. And that ranges from DAOs all the way, which are very small 10-member DAOs, to DAOs that everybody in the world knows of, right? Like, so we have collaborated with Aave on one front, we have worked with Gitcoin on one front, and at the same time, we have worked with DAOs which are pretty new in the form of impact DAO category that is just booming up, filmmaking DAOs. We have done with fashion DAOs, gaming guilds, and whatnot, right? Like, so what we do is we go into a room and we just start analyzing what they do. This is usually a team of people who just sit with the DAO. They try to interpret and experience what exactly is the problem that the DAO is facing. Of course, all the experiments that have done, we need to like gather all the context. And then we usually recommend a solution. And as a result, what has happened is over the past few months, we ourselves have gathered a suite of tools. We have landed ourselves a suite of tools which now make our life a lot easier, because we go to a DAO, we know something or the other that we have built more or less can just be tweaked a little bit and it fits, but still we don't go and plug and play our solution directly. We usually work in closed rooms, closed committees with these DAOs. Of course, we go through the route of proposals. There's a lot of discussion, the broader community gets involved and so on. Now, based on all of that, it's not like it has always been a rosy path. DAOlens has made fair share of mistakes. And that is what brings me to what my take, at least on the DAOs today, are, right? Like, I feel that we are best defined, or we are best probably semi-defined as a form of decentralization, autonomy, and organization. What I mean by that is that on one end, you have decentralized communities, this core idea that anyone can sit anywhere in the world. A developer sitting in somewhere in Siberia could collaborate with somebody sitting in Brazil, and a bounty is floated and anyone will come and grab it and the task will be done, right? Like, that was the core hypothesis. That is what is supposed to be the end state of any community. But as as things have surfaced over the years, and this is something which is, by the way, a very hard lesson for me. What we did internally initially at DAOlens, we assumed that, this is of course going to be the future, because in theory, it sounds really too good. And when we started a year back almost, there was still the bull market. So everyone, like, you could go into a DAO, you could go in and say, hey, I'm going to write a Twitter thread. And somebody was willing to pay you $500 for just writing a Twitter thread. It was not that uncommon of, right? Like, and as a result, what ended up happening was there were like thousands of people who just jump into DAOs. Bounty boards were probably the talk of the town. Everyone was just thinking of, hey, what are the tasks that we go in and launch? How can we really go publicize it? Money was flowing all around. And when the market flipped, now today what happens is you go write a Twitter thread, and probably you'll have to write 5 Twitter threads to get even to a point where you get paid $5, because now everyone is super conservative. The focus is on survival, right? Like, and as this has happened, some of the biggest DAOs, like the names like Index Co-op, which were originally all about 100% decentralization, have also slightly restructured their team. And what I mean by restructured their team is, like, there's this realization that if we just keep it open to the community, there is no guarantee that a work will be done in time, because the community doesn't sometimes have enough context. The community sometimes has its own way of doing things. Sometimes proposals take a lot of time for discussion and whatnot. So more and more DAOs that we have run into are now moving towards that form where there is a core team, and that core team is taking care of certain fixed tracks. And then there are certain specific aspects of the product or certain specific products that are made available for the rest of the world to pick up from, right? Like, similarly, in terms of autonomy, on one end, we go in and say, hey, we're going to make everything powered by smart contracts. But who at the end of the day is really in control of these smart contracts as well? These nodes, at the end of the day, it's us as human beings. We have to interfere, because we're still not there in terms of like leaving all of the control. And organization is pretty clear in terms of like how we are structured as a community, whether we go the sub-DAO route, what's exactly happening in governance, why are there so many proposals around how we should really revamp things, and so on. All in all, what I can say is that the only thing that I interpret out of my experience or my time so far is that DAOs should probably, as of now, just be seen as this proof that a group of people who want to work together now have a sustainable way of working together. That is the only thing that we have probably demonstrated over the past 4, 5, 6 years. As human beings, we have always wanted a group, right? Like you always group against when you have a common interest. Like, go back thousands of years, you would have enough stories of how people grouped against certain causes. They rallied behind certain people. And then because there was no way of like equally distributing rewards, that model would eventually fail, right? Like, it would stay for like 50 years, 60 years, and then it would eventually crumble. Up until 2007 as well, like where there was this call for an open source movement, 2013, where there was this movement about, hey, let's open the internet and whatnot. Even those movements, they didn't sustain because of the way in which, hey, it's great that we are a decentralized community, but somebody out there in the world is bearing the cost for like letting that community even run. Right? Like with crypto, that thing got solved. You had a way of like distributing the cost, distributing the reward, distributing the benefits, which is why my take is that we have proved that a group of people who want to work together can work together. But what we really call as a DAO 5 years later may be probably absolutely different from what we call a DAO today. Right? Let me just put myself on DND. I'm very sorry. Yeah. So we'll keep moving on. And now I'm not going to talk more about theories. We're just going to talk about 12 broader themes that I see emerging. This thing that you see here on the screen, it just says that you can pretty much tweet and win. And the tagline here is tag me @Vix_Ram and DAOs at Denver and win a free conference ticket. What I mean by that is DAOlens is partnering with a whole host of organizations, and we are taking part in sort of organizing 3 workshops exclusively focused on DAOs. Because we are the host, we can, of course, give you tickets to those events like super premier tickets. So I'm just going to pick out on 2 or 3 winners from whoever goes and talks about whatever you hear here, because the goal is not for you to summarize what I talked about or to put me in highlight. I would rather want, if we can, like out of those 12 points, if we can even have 2 threads ongoing where there is some meaningful conversation happening, some good ideas being exchanged, it would be lovely to see. And if you just go about and tag me, I'm going to take part in that conversation. And trust me, if I like the conversation and the way it's going forward, I'm going to include you. If you are in the States, this is brilliant. If you're coming to Denver, you should definitely do it any which way. We're working with some of the best organizations. A lot of these details are still in the cooking. So we'll make it all public. I assume like even from my personal profile by the next week or mid of like this weekend as well. Okay, let's go on. What are the top opportunity areas that we are seeing right now in the DAOverse? The first one that has definitely emerged, and this is emerged from probably pretty much whatever is happening across the community, is that there is a more and more move towards delegation, right? Like this term delegate has its own term in different communities. There are certain communities that just go in and use it in the sense of, hey, I'm giving you my voting power. That is the core idea of delegation. I'm giving you my voting power. I can take it away any day. But now you will see a lot of experiment being done with what exactly is the meaning of that delegation. And there are so many communities that are sort of like aligned to the idea that delegation may really be a very strong way, given how it has performed over the past year, a very strong way of like sort of tackling this absence of participation that see from communities because of maybe people are not available all the time or because of their lack of knowledge and so on. But the way these delegates are being incentivized and how you really keep these delegates also in checks and balances. And what I mean here, like I'm just going to throw one example so that you can like have your thinking hats on as well. See, there has been a talk in a lot of communities that if you go in and ask people to say yes to something, it's going to be tougher than asking people to say no to something. And what I mean by that is like, imagine we are all here sitting and saying, if everyone in the audience should get an ice cream, let's say that is a proposal, right? Like, and if that is a proposal, getting maybe ice cream is a bad topic that I picked up. Let's say that I go in and say, should we have a 2-day DAO camp in 2024? Right? Like now, should we have a 10-day DAO camp? Should we have an offline summit? Whatever. Let's say we have that now. And if we have 100 people who are listening to this in different formats, getting 51 of them to actively contribute and come up with their thoughts in terms of should we do it or not is going to be tougher. Instead, if you just go in and say, hey, you know what? We have decided that we are going to do it in an offline way. Here is why. And if you feel that should not happen, please come and oppose it. You will see higher response rate. These are experiments that are being done as we speak in communities in terms of how people participate. And it's almost always related to incentivization, because when you're trying to oppose something, what is the incentive that you have for participating in that manner? It essentially leads to a lot of maths, a lot of economics. But this, if you have like any ideas, any suggestions in there, even if you just start going tweeting about it or blogging about it anywhere out there in the world, trust me, some of the best working groups across DAOs are going to notice you. They're going to notice you because this is a problem that everybody has been scratching their heads around, right? Like we'll keep discussing all of these problems one by one. And then if there is a need of like diving deeper into any of the problems, we could do that. But in the interest of time, I'll just move to the next one. Integration of tools, right? Like, see, now, again, I am slightly of the unpopular opinion set here. There's a lot of talk about how the number of tools have like just become too much and that there is really not that much of a need and the maturity is missing and whatnot. But at the same time, there are certain shifts happening. I'm seeing more and more communities, and we're seeing this trend across some of the biggest communities, right? Like when I say biggest communities, think of whatever is happening at Polygon, think of whatever is happening in Solana, think of whatever is happening in Near ecosystem, think of whatever is happening as these new chains and new solutions, new L1s, L2s, like everything like Optimism and Cosmos as they are picking up, right? Like what's really happening inside is this idea that decentralized autonomous organization are just thinking of it in the form of a community may probably not be the optimum case. You have a community, but why can't you think of it in the form of a village? And the way I usually go about interpreting this is the way you have always seen tech park villages in the world, right? Like you have a shop, you have a restaurant, you have a bouquet. It's all there. It's all there out there individually. Anybody could go on and make up their offerings available. But whether you are deeply knit in the ecosystem, whether you are deeply integrated with the rest of the folks or not, essentially decides if you're going to be successful or not. Now, let me dive a little deeper here, right? Like what I really mean by integration of tools. If you have worked at a DAO, right? Like, and I'm pretty sure because you're sitting here, you pretty much understand 80% or 90% at least of what I'm saying. Maybe you have a better opinion as well on some fronts than me, but think of how a DAO progresses today, right? Like there is a discussion that happens on Discord. Okay. Most of the DAOs are in Discord. Like, of course, there will be exceptions here and there. Now, from Discord, you move the conversation to a forum, something like Discourse, right? Like on Discourse, more people join. They say, oh, yeah, we should probably do an offline summit, right? Like, okay, cool. Now you realize, oh, looks like there are 30 people who are showing interest. Maybe if I float a proposal and get these 30 people to rally behind, I can create a momentum of creating a vote. So you go to a platform like Snapshot, right? Like you float a vote. Now, whatever be the model of voting, and I've seen a lot of discussion happening about is quadratic voting good, is simple voting good, what can you do, how can you try and whatnot. So I'm probably not going to get into the details of all of that. But let's say you float out a vote, whatever is the model of your voting, whatever is the consensus and the quorum mechanism. Let's say you have an agreement, right? Like the vote passes through. Now, the vote is passed, so there are going to be ideally two outcomes. You're probably going to get a grant or you're probably going to get the funds and you're supposed to deliver on it, right? Like in any of these situations, you essentially end up creating a lot of tasks and bounties and gigs. Maybe some of it is with your core internal team. Maybe some of it you are taking care of it, or all of it you are taking care of, right? Like now, these tasks, they need to go on a bounty board of sorts, right? Like, so you are probably using a tool like DAOverse, you're using a tool like Trello, you're doing everything, task is getting assigned, whatnot. Now, once tasks are there, there comes the idea of reviews, right? Like, so somebody is submitting, somebody is reviewing these tasks, and so on and so on, right? Like a task is reviewed, the reviewer goes and says, okay, looks good. Then comes the idea of payout. So we go to another tool like Coordinate or Gnosis Safe or Llama Pay, whatever we are using for payouts. And then you go in and copy paste the same amount from the task. You go in and copy paste the wallet from the, if it's connected, it's great, but you're still essentially doing all the operations in Gnosis. And then when the payout is done, this person who got the payout, essentially they should get some sort of a reputational benefit because they did the task, they delivered on it, right? Like, so that reputational benefit comes in the form of XP points, NFTs, whatever. Now, how many tools did we discuss so far? I'm not yet done with the flow, by the way, either. But we discussed Discord, we discussed Discourse, we discussed Snapshot, we discussed DAOverse or Trello, we discussed payout, we discussed reputation. That's 6 tools already, right? Like now, think of it. How many people do you even know in the DAO space who are probably working just for one community, right? Like you probably don't know of those many people. Like everyone is at least a part of 2 or 3 communities. And all of these communities, they're using their own different tool stacks, which means somebody is dealing with 10 to 15 to 20 instances of tool, depending on which communities they are a part of. We are here to like contribute to the ecosystem, not to juggle between tools, which is why while these individual tools are great, there is this core belief that more and more tools will start getting integrated with each other. They would start talking with each other. In fact, at DAOverse, we have built a solution as well, where all of these tools that I listed with, everything can be done from one platform. If you are a part of 4 communities, you could manage everything. I'll talk about it at the very end in case you're interested. But this whole idea of like people getting away from the core thesis of just thinking about it in the form of a DAO, but thinking more in the form of an ecosystem is only going to increase in terms of conviction if the experiments and if the demonstrations so far are any proof point, right? Like, and if we take that as a base, and if I were in your shoe, I would probably start thinking of, okay, do I just go on and build something like Zapier, which probably goes and talks to everyone? Zapier is a pretty well-known Web2 tool that probably talks to almost 70% of the tools out there, the 70% of the famous tools out there. Or maybe think of it like there are so many reputation tools, right? Like there's PoApp, there is Rep3, there is, I don't even know how many of them are there. But if you just go on and build a tool that is not really adding reputation, you are just going and reading reputation from all of these tools and collating all of these reputation and then doing some insights on it, you are suddenly becoming a very valuable offering in the ecosystem. So if you were to probably think of a business, this is not really a bad domain again, or a bad thinking direction, thinking point to explore. Next is like creative parking of capital for sustenance, right? Like we're seeing this happen more and more in the ecosystems. Last year, I was just talking about it. Bounties were sky high. There was this approach of, oh, we have money. We do bounties. We do tasks. We do promotional materials. We do X, Y, Z. And then on the other end, there are these DAOs that just have funds sitting. They don't do anything. Right. So you have examples of like Nouns, for example, where there is so much funding that's happening on a day-to-day basis. And on the other end, you have something like a very small DAO that is so scared of the times that we are in that it's not really able to take any decision, make any changes in their system at all. Which is why there's been a lot of discussion essentially happening in terms of how do we really go in and diversify the treasury? And when I say diversify the treasury, that doesn't mean just picking a part of it and putting it into a DeFi so that you can optimize the yield. It's about how do you really deploy this treasury the way VC funds do, right? Like, by the way, we all in Web3, there is this notion of looking at VC funds in a very negative way. And on a large, like on a lot of counts, I understand why that happens. But if you just observe their behavior, because they have learned it over 40, 50, 60 years of how funds are to be managed. In a bear cycle, they also start behaving very different, right? Like, but it's not like they're just sitting on the funds. They have a very different pool of capital deployed for certain seasons, a very different pool of capital deployed for when everything is going green and everyone is like just getting investments left, right, and center. And what that essentially also means is that crypto is finding, or like at least battling at this point, a very big battle of like not just depending on the token prices. What that means is, hey, just because your tokens crashed by 80%, you should not be thinking about, oh my God, how do I survive the next 2 years? Right? Like, so you cannot really get yourself to not think about it if you are not only dependent on that token. So again, if you are just thinking of like, what are some of the opportunities area for me to work right now, you could probably think of directions like synthetic tokens and tokens that are not really like it's a mix of stable coins and whatnot. But essentially, if you just start like again doing some economical models on it in terms of, hey, there are 5 buckets of funds and how do we really move money from here to there depending on different scenarios and cycles. Of course, it would need a lot of testing. But if you come up with something, probably just try as an experiment, publish a PDF or a report or a white paper saying, hey, this is what I have analyzed based on the data set I got from the last, let's say, these 10 DAO treasuries. You're probably again going to get into some very interesting conversations. There are already few people who are trying to solve it through very complex means. And I don't think we probably need complex means as of now, not just because we are young, but also because of the fact that DAOs themselves, the people who are managing the treasury may not all be economical experts, right? Like, so you need to like tackle the user experience of keeping things super simple. So this is again a very strong opportunity area as far as my thought processes, my realizations, and the belief internally here at DAOverse go. Then this one is a very interesting one. You will get it immediately. Everyone has heard of air miles. You probably own a credit card. You have credit card points. You keep swapping it for rewards. Now, every second company in the world is just going and publishing NFTs. Starbucks is an NFT, Porsche is an NFT, Disney is an NFT, Nike is an NFT. Great. If it's just about collectibles, that's one thing. But every brand in the world is not just thinking about collectibles. There are these ideas in terms of, hey, can we have exclusive clubs of people? So let's say I'm a contributor in Vita DAO, right? Like it's a DAO in the biospace, or let's say I'm a contributor in BioDAO. Now, because of being a contributor in BioDAO, I let's say get an NFT, and similarly, you are a contributor in DAOlens and you get another NFT. Now, because you have a DAOlens NFT, right? Like you should probably have certain perks in the world, and it's more like, hey, you are holding a platinum Amex card, so you have access to certain things, right? Like it's similarly on those lines. Think of like something where you can go and float around the idea that every BAYC, Bored Ape Yacht Club holder, is probably now going to have access to booking hotels at 30% of a discount. And there are enough examples of programs that have happened like this. The reason it's going to become more and more mainstream is because Web2 brands are coming into the scene of NFTs and like giving reputation and giving rewards and like giving some sort of an identity. But they do not really have tangible use cases. And the best or the easiest way of probably like just adding value to it is saying that, hey, now that you have defined that this person is having an NFT, probably give them some additional perks. Let them have exclusive benefits, right? Like there are people already doing things like this. Starbucks has a Starbucks loyalty program that deals with NFTs, but again, that's a one-off example. And think of like doing with the top 10 brands in the world. Again, a very strong idea to explore. I have probably like personally presented this idea in a few communities, and everybody gets in their thinking mode. How would this work? Okay, this sounds interesting, and so on, right? Like, so probably a few of you are already thinking and like taking notes on this front as well. Would love to see if somebody has any thoughts. I have floated proposals on this behalf myself in a few communities, getting them to rally behind it. So would love to see somebody come up with some solutions on these domains as well. You will see like 2021 was about some of the DAOs just like getting started. 2022 saw more and more DAOs take on things like we'll send one person to the space, we'll send one person to the, right? Like there have been these Constitution DAO, right? Like got a lot of I would say interest from people because they were amazed by how somebody could come and do something like that. And then there were enough stories about how certain NFTs sold for hundreds of millions, right? Like, and you were like, oh, the group of people are really coming and having fun. And I just don't see that trend going anywhere away because it's the way we as human beings behave. So again, like if you just have that core thought in mind, which you think everybody relates to, and you just maybe want to come up with a group of people who are, you don't even have like probably go in and read. We have done an interview on it's there on our YouTube channel. It again goes by the name of DAOlens, but on our YouTube channel, you will see this interview with one of the core contributors of Constitution DAO back then. And we just asked him like, hey, how did you really go about creating that element of virality? And he was like, we probably didn't even know that we were going to do this. And that has happened so many times because there was this other DAO who sent that guy who keeps dunking his basketball, right? Like they chose him. And then I was like, okay, let's talk to a few people from that community. I got hold of them. And then again, they were like, the interesting part is they didn't really do anything, but the rally still happened. The virality still came in because of the way we as human beings behave. This model is not really going to go anywhere. You will see people gathering towards doing such insane things. And I don't see this being absurd in any way, right? Like there have been a lot of comments saying, oh, DAO should probably not be thinking about people sent, like people going to moon. They should be thinking about how governance work. Sure, 80%, 90%, 95% of the effort should be about that. But we are again human beings. We will continue to behave. So if you have that thought in your head, probably go check out how these communities picked up and just go do it. Who knows, you may be the next talk of the town in the DAOverse. Legality and taxation frameworks, big time coming. I think this is a slightly saturated space because there are probably a lot of solutions being offered already, but I don't still see anything as being pretty good. So in terms of legality, I think it was around December 23 of 2022, 2 or 3 days before Christmas, when Marshall Islands said that, hey, we're going to have DAOs recognized in an LLC and we'll take care of everything. Like there's this group called MIDAO, and then MIDAO, they came and they worked with the government in Marshall Islands to come up with how DAOs could like get legal identity and like benefits around taxes and whatnot. So good things are happening as well on that front, but there is still an absurd amount of ambiguity when it comes to, oh, I'm sitting in Tokyo, I'm thinking of launching my own DAO. Am I going to go to a prison? Am I going to be held accountable for? Because there have been instances, right? Like Uki DAO, whatever happened with Uki DAO. It was so funny and actually so insensible also of the government to go on and like jump into the forum and say, hey, we are serving you notice. And there's a lot happening on that as well. I think like 2 days back only, the people, the core contributors who were asked to like show up, they didn't show up. So I have mixed views on that. I don't want to digress right now, but legality remains a lot in a blurry zone. On top, what's interesting is that every DAO has probably paid hundreds of contributors around the world if you have bounty model. Now, if your company today pays you a salary, they probably pre-deduct your tax, or they give you a tax form and you are supposed to deduct the tax on their behalf if you're working as a consultant, right? Like these things may vary slightly depending on which geography you are comfortable with or used to or understand properly. But there is this element of taxes getting getting accounted for in the very minute you are getting paid out. Now, these DAOs, they are sitting in, let's say some DAO is sitting, the folks are sitting out of Canada, they're wiring money to somebody sitting in Hong Kong. There are going to be a lot of tax related complications because now everyone is after your life to like pay taxes. And this year in particular is very interesting because for the first time, I believe 15th April in the US happens to be the time when you have to like file all the taxes by. And this would be probably, yes, this would be the first time where we are just going to go in and see what happens to those who have probably not done any sort of crypto taxation. And there will be a lot of people for sure. But the government is also not going to sit. They're going to come up with some measures. And then there would suddenly be like a crisis mode in the month of May and June because people would start panicking about 2024. That, oh my God, now I have to take care of this. In exchanges and DAOs, there are transactions worth $1 million happening within like days and weeks, right? Like for exchanges, it's like maybe even hours. And that's a lot. That's a lot because if you do not start fixing the solution or start fixing how the process is set up so that you can account for those taxes on day one, it's probably going to be very tough to pick it up mid of the year. So if you are into this, if you have a finance and a legal background, I think there is a lot of scope in here because none of the solutions that claim that they have solved it have actually solved it. And that is evident in how the bigger DAOs, like probably go build a solution that the top 5 DAOs in the world agree to using, and you would have built a product that's probably going to be worth tens of billions of dollars. ChatGPT, of course, how could we miss this? So the most interesting opportunity area, at least what's keeping me awake lately at night, is being ChatGPT. You're seeing it here, there, people are talking about it. There are so many TikTok and Instagram videos of how cool ChatGPT is and whatnot. But I've always thought if it could help with community engagement. And what I mean by community engagement is in DAOs, in Web3 communities, we go on and complain about, oh, we floated a proposal, people are not talking about it. Hey, we have a vote, only 5 people came and voted on it and whatnot. And to some extent, that also happens because people are busy. But to a large extent, the reason is because people don't just feel comfortable talking about things that they don't know, which means you probably need somebody to educate them the minute they are reading the proposal. I read a proposal, I don't get it. I have the voting power. If I just close the tab, that's done. So you probably have to hold me there and teach me what that is about and like engage with me in a way. And this is what we have been thinking of internally here in terms of, can we just make a solution available? Because anyway, ChatGPT is brilliantly evolving. And if we go in and make a solution available where ChatGPT starts suggesting you things and ideas in the form of, hey, okay, Adam, come here. Here is what the proposal is about. I have drafted a reply for you. But before you send that reply, you should know why that reply is being sent. Or maybe if you are using a pre-created reply to just seem cool, there are certain impacts like connected to your reputation, right? Like, and it's so interesting because I actually did so a couple of folks from my team and we were sitting together yesterday, and we were just sitting together and like feeding some parameters, right? Like, so we were picking up a DAO and we were like, okay, like, this is a good proposal, this is a bad proposal, this is a good proposal, this is a bad proposal. Now give me 5 proposal ideas, right? Like, and the bot came up with the proposal ideas, which is so interesting. Like, we did it for Maker, right? Like, and see, this is a sample proposal. I have not like put the entire proposal, but just look at the language here. Implementing a DAO staking program. Staking programs have become increasingly popular in the DeFi space as a way to incentivize users and hold a particular asset. With the increasing popularity, it's important to explain whether. So the proposal is to implement a DAO staking program that allows users to earn a percentage of the total DAO supply as a reward for holding and using DAO. Can you even imagine it? This has been drafted by AI. If I was trying to draft this, I would probably do a relatively poorer job. It took me 2 minutes to get this proposal up when I was just like trying to float these parameters into the DAO and saying like, hey, come up with something. Which is why we are like extremely bullish on all the possibilities and these are very low hanging fruits, right? Like, so I have the entire proposal, and if you read through the entire proposal, it actually does math and shows how the treasury is ultimately going to benefit and whatnot. And I was like, oh my God, I probably didn't even feed those many parameters in the initial place, because I honestly just gave it sample of 20 proposals, which I felt were good. And I was like, okay, show me more proposals like this. So you can like clearly, if you're interested in doing something like this, again, hit me up. Would love to chat with you on it, because we are anyway exploring a bunch of things. But nonetheless, if you're just thinking of what should I build in the DAOverse, I think this is the easiest one to pick up and probably the least crowded one right now. A lot of people are just still getting comfortable. If you start doing it with parameters, there are no code offerings. You probably don't even have to write code. So get that idea off your mind. Just Google a few terms and you will get into it. If you need help, reach out to me in DMs. Stringent reputation measures. This is again one of the unpopular opinion set ideas, but it's something that has been gaining a lot of, I would say, interest, or at least it's making a lot of people curious. Now, this has been tried as an experiment in a lot of communities, that we go to a community and let's say you voted on a proposal and that proposal didn't really do good. Should we go in and penalize you? Right? Like, and when I say penalize you, that doesn't mean financial penalization. That means you have to like probably let go of some of your reputation, or that thing will sit on your reputation forever, saying that you made 3 wrong decisions and whatnot, right? Like, and this thing has been tried in different words and different formats across DAOs, and people hate it. People hate it because of the fact that, hey, if you are really going and like having this thing said that you are penalizing people, then how is this even an open system? How is this even decentralized? Aren't you like really not making it inclusive? Isn't that the idea that you should not be scared of a central authority and whatnot? But the core is like, you could probably come up with measures where you are not really damaging the reputation permanently, but you are like enabling people to make better decisions by carrying the learning forward. And this sort of like gets interconnected to the core idea that I had initially, which was about delegation, where you will see delegation and reputation and the fact that the org structure can be done in different ways be experimental grounds for a lot of projects. The tougher part is that if you are really trying to do something that gets adopted, you will probably have to deal with reputation, delegation, and all of that from one offering or one framework. But the good news is that it's like a whiteboard for you right now. So you could just start with this if you have some ideas. And we have been trying to do it, right? Like it's also to the extent that, okay, we are not really going to damage your reputation, but there is going to be a virtual reputation that's going to get affected so that you can learn from it, and so on. So this is again like a very interesting area, not a popular one. Maybe a lot of people would outrightly deny as well, because I have been in that situation where they're like, oh, but that doesn't work. But I know some of the best communities at least thinking about this problem as well right now in their heads. So this is again something very interesting. DAO to DAO collaboration and collectives, my favorite topic. I think this was an article that I read somewhere, and it had a brilliant line saying, time for no servers, only peers, right? Like, it was the idea that you see a DAO today goes into another DAO and votes, and they affect a lot of decisions, a lot of decision making gets changed based on, because these DAOs, like, they are whales, right? Like in terms of the tokens that they hold when they come and start participating on decisions and governance proposals. But essentially what we mean by collectives here, or what I'm trying to convey, is that we are essentially moving towards a world where if there is a problem, a company and an org has floated a problem, you will see a bunch of people come and say, oh, I'll do it for you, right? Like you will see a bunch of people who you have never met, right? Like just they're passionate about it, sitting somewhere as a group of folks, collectives, who will go in and say, we'll take care of end to end, let us like pay us, right? Like for doing this and so on. And sometimes people just group together to do something, and that ends up becoming a solution that can be presented into a lot of communities. Like even when we go on and work with DAOs, we group not with the idea of building a tool, but on a lot of fronts that ends up becoming a tool, right? Like, and the problem is that we are doing it in a forced fashion. We are thinking that, this solution now works, can we productize it? But by nature, it should be a world where anybody is just grouping with anyone, You collaborate, you jam on something. Let's say it's a whiteboard. We jam on something. If in 1 hour we come up with something meaningful, which we feel can be utilized somewhere, we go push it into that. We apply for a grant, we apply for a proposal, we make a submission. If not, we let it go, right? Like, so you will start seeing this idea of, oh, we are a DAO with 1,000 members really going to go away, and these smaller and smaller communities collaborating with each other, where you can go in and say, oh, I'm a developer collective. Here is a designer collective. Why don't we two pair up and solve this thing for, let's say, Tesla that's probably raised this question, right? Like, so the world is moving towards that. It's just that it's not going to happen today, suddenly. These things are behavioral changes. You will have to demonstrate. You will probably have to keep your head down and keep building for 3 years before you head up, before you like result into any meaningful outcome, before you land into any meaningful outcome. But nonetheless, something which I'm very curious about, because this looks like one of the biggest opportunity areas to me as far as enterprise or to our communication, and where like the big buck, as they say, is really. Member activation and measurement. I think now, thankfully, today only there was an article about ApeCoin or somebody like going, the community ApeCoin going and deploying a tool for like activating people. And because they have realized that there's loss of context and people are just lost and they don't know what is to be done. But essentially, again, the goal being that getting people into the community needs to be different than how they're getting to contribute. And it's very easy to ignore it, that, oh, I have landed on Discord. I have reacted on 3 emojis. One was a banana, one was a jumping monkey, and I have gotten roles and I'm all set. But that is rarely how the world works. Like, when you are even in that spot, go back and remember the first time you joined a community, you probably felt lost, right? Like, you were like, oh, what is the gig that I do? Am I going to get paid? How much am I going to get paid? The problem is, unless you really go and do a flow where a designer is being greeted in a very different way than a developer, you're probably just going to be all over the place. You essentially need to look at what that person has done in the past and then give them a viewpoint, like charter a reputation pathway for them. That essentially means that, hey, you are a designer and I know you want to go there, do these 3 gigs, participate in 2 governance, this, participate in that, participate in this, and you can probably reach there, right? Like, show them the pathway. When you do that, you are essentially doing what you do today in Web2 companies. And there's nothing wrong with it, just because it's Web2. When an employee comes, you greet them with all of your open hearts, right? Like, 3 people go, you go in and have lunch with them, you show them what's where, and then you tell them, hey, you know what? The secret is that you need to really do these things to shine here in the org. That gives them motivation, that gives them clarity in terms of if they really want to grow in that way, what are they supposed to do? So member activation and measurement, in the sense of who even came into the community, where did they come from, right? Like, maybe I needed a front-end developer. That person is sitting in front of me, and I don't even know that that's a front-end developer because I never asked. And they never really read where I asked that if you're a front-end developer, please ping me. So good opportunity areas, again, offerings on that front. In fact, DAOlence's first product was in this domain itself. And we have heard all sorts of comments, communities that love it, communities that say, oh, we don't really need it. And thankfully, the narrative is now changing, where more and more communities are becoming open and friendly to it. Of course, we are in Web3, so you will see more of media first products. I think this has been a phenomenal start to an year where some of the best media products that I knew of, they got sold. And what I mean by opportunities around more media first products is because we are still in that age where 99.99% of the people are not yet in Web3. That means products will do their bit when it comes to simplifying their experiences, but somebody also has to go in and do their bit in educating them, right? Like, and if you go about thinking in a way of, oh, I want to build a followers base, you'll probably not do good. But if you just go with the idea of, I know what ZK rollups are, and I'm going to talk about them in context of DAOs, and I'm just going to do like 100 videos on them. Best communities as well have understood the importance of it, because suddenly now you have a audience base or a distribution base. And in Web3, you could not really be in a mode like this. Is again another low hanging fruit. You don't even have to be an expert. You just go on and do some videos, do some audios, start hosting people on podcasts and whatnot. Like, just be consistent, disciplined, and good. Please be good, because there is a lot of noise. And if you are that, you will end up landing into a situation where somebody wants to work with you or some company wants to acquire you or something, right? Like, so again, if you're thinking from the point of, hey, how do I go in and capture all of the things? Like, you could pretty much get into a room with the best of the person at Bankless if you have built an individual distribution channel. And I have seen that happen, right? Like, so this is always going to be an evergreen field, at least for the next few years, because we are still too early. And grant management, this had to be here. It's also been a topic that half of my team here at DAOverse has been sweating about. The core idea that, hey, there are like hundreds of people who are applying for grants every day. And there are these communities like Polygon who have stopped giving grants. The reason they stopped giving grants was because they were like, it becomes too tough for us to manage what's happening after we have given somebody $20,000, because they never really revert back. All we know is like a wallet ID. What do we do if they don't revert back, and so on, right? Like, and there are different models. There are solutions for that, just like governance, just like different forms of voting. There are different ways of giving grants. There are milestone-based grants. There is retroactive funding, which means like you are retroactively looking at if the product did good and then you're funding. And now with the boom of everything around impact DAOs and these smaller DAOs that are like into investments, there are so many smaller things that are still happening, right? Like you have like lots of funds being dispersed here and there, and the tracking becomes a problem, because I can get $20,000 for like saying that I'll build a YouTube channel, and then I don't build a YouTube channel. What are you going to do about it? This needs to go away, which is why there are innovation areas possible in terms of where exactly is that money being stored. What if this random person called Charlie took 10 ETH from me and they only used 6 ETH? So can I return the 4 ETH back into the treasury and whatnot, right? Like, so when I say grant management, I mean in general fund management, to the extent where it's less about, hey, grab $5,000 and go on your own way. It's more about, if you have taken these $5,000, I'm going to give you 500 more as well. But you need to prove that you're going to deliver on it. And unless you prove you're going to deliver on it, I'm not going to give you even the first penny. Now, this as a product is a mistake. If you're thinking about it, think of it as a standard. What I mean by a standard is that any developer sitting in the world could probably use some of the variables that you have to offer. So there are these building blocks in terms of, what is the funding mechanism? What is the application process? Is it supposed to be a one-liner, right? Like, you have these templates. Where are the reviewers going to? Some of those will be standard offerings that this is how the UI is going to look. And some of those are composable blocks, which people can fill here and there. But any developer sitting in somewhere in Colombia or a developer sitting somewhere in Melbourne can just go in and say, hey, I'm going to pick up on this and build my own grant management system for my community, right? Like, that is again a very interesting play that you could go around with, because we are so early that you will have maybe another 10,000 communities at the very least, protocols that want more and more developers to build on them, which means there is like a very good amount of fund sitting to be disbursed. And if you are facilitating that, you are pretty much like, it's like the same quote in a gold rush, go sell picks and shovels, right? Like, so you are pretty much in that domain as far as business point of view goes. So those were some of the top 12, 13 things. And like, it's not like there's only 12. I honestly just picked the top 12 from this notepad that I have of like over 50 directions. But like, I paid attention to like making it slightly relevant here. And I'm a big fan of like keeping myself updated with what's happening. So there's some very interesting updates that have been coming up in the last 72 hours worldwide. World Economic Forum and European Union, they are getting involved into DAOs, and like they are coming into things around what should a DAO do, how should it be structured, which is only good news. If people like this come, you need like hundreds of such conversations over like months and months and months, back to back, before DAOs become that thing where there is enough support from the ecosystem. It's okay for some DAOs to mess up. It's okay for some DAOs to experiment, so that you can really make DAOs adopted, right? Like, whatever we say, unless we go get a buy-in from everyone else who is associated or who is in a position of power, decentralization is okay. But then at the end of the day, we are still like dealing with banks at the very end of the funnel, right? Like, there is an on-ramp and an off-ramp that is associated, and you could go on and do a lot of things just with crypto. Like, practically you can go on and live just with crypto today, but then there are implications in terms of, legal aspects, because we are citizens and we are supposed to be in some geography, and their geography has certain laws and whatnot. So we can only run so much from it. And I think this is brilliant news that some of the best like mainstream orgs are coming into the fold. Compensation also, like we are seeing. So I'm sorry about that spelling error there, but Decentraland is playing with fixed compensation models to increase dependability. And this goes back to, again, the same thing that I was saying, like delegation or like governance. How should you really be restructuring it? This is a news from like a few hours back. Decentraland is saying that, hey, for the core committee, there is going to be a fixed salary so that they do not feel pressurized to like make more money, or they do not know how much they're going to make. And when that happens, they stop contributing in the core fashion, in a dependable fashion, and everything becomes slow, right? Like DAOs need to get into that stage where you're like, okay, as a company goes and says, we'll launch a product on 20th, and they actually launch a product on 28th, DAOs also need to be able to do that. If you have been a part of DAOs, you will realize that we keep pushing the timeline very conveniently. And then finally, survival plays. Sushi actually came up. Now, I'm not a big fan of the proposal and the way it happened, but Sushi came up with a play on how its fee should really go back to the treasury, which also sounds a little bit desperate, but it sounds brilliant as well, because they're essentially saying that, hey, we'll do whatever is needed to help the ecosystem survive. It's unfortunate that the vote was just controlled by a few whales and the motion passed, but the core proposal was that in Sushi, the swap that you do, you are probably the fee that you get out of it, which usually goes as a commission, is now just going to go back to the treasury, and nobody is going to really earn just because you put money into the swap, right? Like, which means essentially all the Sushi holders, and that's a massive community. I don't know, maybe we are talking like hundreds of thousands of people, and they are just like, the reason they put money into Sushi, which is why Sushi's prices have also been going down. But I think it's a brilliant move. I'm pretty amazed by how it unfolded in terms of like this sort of a measure, and these sort of examples are like more and more needed. And that brings me to the very end. I have a link here for you. It says check out manager.daolins.com. And it's very simple, MANAG or manager.daolins.com. And the tool that I talked about, which pretty much replaces Discord, Snapshot, Dework, and we are doing like a whole bunch of cool stuff there. Even things like, hey, people with red caps in their monkeys or on their apes as NFTs can all hang out together and have a chat. To the extent people who have only done like 10 kills in a game are allowed to access this, right? Like we go work with creators who are trying to sell merchandise. We go work with educators who are trying to sell courses. We go work with protocols and ecosystems like Polygon. We go work with DAOs. We go work with gaming guilds, any Web3 community, even Web2 communities on some extent, who find it useful that there is a forum and everything is all in one place. So if you are a part of 5 communities, you don't really have to jump anywhere. And that doesn't mean that your community really has to use everything that we are offering. Like, it's deeply integrated. So you can continue to use Snapshot, and everything you do there will also be populated here. It's a lovely tool to check out. Again, if you go in there, you will be able to make sense of stuff on your own. But if you fail, you have me on my DM. I am @Vikram. And of course, there's a support button in the product as well. And that's pretty much a wrap. So I'm going to share this presentation as well with the organizing team so that they can share it with you. And you will have recordings as well later on. I think they will be made available for purchase. But that's a wrap from my end. Ross, over to you. And I'm not sure if there are more questions that were